Okay, welcome. We have a very special episode today with Doctor Multimedia. We have Pras Murthy from Doctor Multimedia. Are you the president or CEO? What's the official title?
Technically CFO.
CFO.
Yeah,
okay.
Technically.
Yeah. But I feel like when you're partners in like a small company, you end up doing everything and anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I show up every day and I do anything that's needed, I think, is the job description.
Yeah, I think we have similar roles here at Shared Practices. I also have George. George, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm excited. This episode is overdue. I think this has been something we've been needing to talk about, and the skeptic turned believer in the room is excited to really talk about the subject.
Yeah. So this we're recording this before season 6 is really like rolling. We're doing a whole season on growth, and that includes marketing. And a big part of this is who do I hire? Who do I work with? What do I do? There's so many questions in marketing. And people also sometimes get burned. Like they have a frustrating experience. They spend their money in the wrong way. And so this is something we've been nervous about. We've been nervous about this season because the other side of it too is people tend to be very ADD with this. It's like, oh, I heard this thing on a podcast. I'm going to go do it. And then I heard something else on another marketing podcast. I'm going to go do that. And it's easy to get lost in the noise of how do I grow my practice? And who do I help? Who do I choose? And what are the essentials of that? So we're going to talk about that today. And but I think we need to introduce this relationship because I didn't realize how far you guys went back. In fact, back to high school, not at the same time. But share with us the connections you two share.
Sure. So first of all, I think we need to introduce this. Did we talk about Doctor Multimedia already? Has that been mentioned? Like
just the name
of the name of the company. So Matt actually found them first.
Okay.
And so Matt and I, as you know, building our coaching department, we're looking for those services that our clients should be signing up with. And, you know, we vet different companies. And he's like, I really like this company for online marketing and social media management and websites and all that stuff. And he shoots it over to me and it looked familiar. And so I'm like, wait, are these the guys from, and I'll explain in a minute, but there's this website that I was a big fan of growing up in Tucson, Arizona, as a fan of the University of Arizona basketball. That's like really big down there. Pras is also from there. We went to the same high school, turns out. And in Tucson, there's no pro sports, but the pro sport is college basketball.
That's like the thing there.
Everybody loves college basketball. Season tickets, there's a waiting list to get on the season ticket list.
Wow.
And I grew up, you know, biggest Arizona Wildcat basketball fan. And there was this website that I subscribed to. It was called Point Guard U. That's the name of our school, the nickname of our school in the basketball world. And they had a forum and they had a paid forum. I paid every year to be a part of this insiders, the nerdiest thing ever.
What year is this?
This is
Date this for us.
I was probably 2010 to 2013 a member of this forum, like paying my money to be exclusive information on the insides of the program.
Wow.
And so I knew these guys that ran this site very well. I'd been a member of their forum, followed them on Twitter for years, and I actually paid to get like access to their most exclusive information. And come to find out that, you know, and they shut down the site because they went and started this company that creates, you know, websites for doctors and dentists and all that stuff. And so I knew about that they did that, but I became a dentist, forgot all about them and this. And then Matt introduced me to them again. I'm like, wait, these are the guys that I paid for that Wildcat information. And it was, yeah. So I've been for me, you know, meeting Pras is very much a fanboy moment of like, I've watched as a kid, I was watching this guy on YouTube with like 10 views on these videos, like interviewing these future NBA players, future Wildcats. And so the fact that we know each other that way is just the weirdest, smallest world thing ever.
The first thing that George said was like, you're taller in real life because apparently you're interviewing these basketball players.
Yeah. And they're like 6'7", 6'8".
How tall are you?
I'm 6 feet, but I look minuscule.
You looked like my height, you know? And then I meet you, I'm like, whoa, you're taller than I imagined.
Just by comparison.
Now, you guys have thousands of clients. Has anybody ever before me recognized the Point Guard U thing?
You are literally the first, and as far as I know, the last person to have that connection. I mean, neither of us live in Tucson anymore.
Right.
We didn't know we both went to the same high school till today.
Right. Yeah.
We were just reverse engineering that. So, yes, I'm sure that we have clients in Tucson. We have other Wildcat fans, but no one has been like, oh, you're Pras from Point Guard U.
Yeah, I mean, but that puts into perspective just how big of a fan of Arizona basketball I am. You know what I mean? Like, you and I, we talked earlier, like we talked specific games events that happened 10 years ago, and we both remember them very well.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
It was our lives.
It's our life. Yes.
Well, this is indulging George, because usually George gets mad if there's like 5 minutes of non-dental, banter. Now he has a whole podcast of that, Dental Friends with Benefits, with Dr. Ashley Hoves. So maybe we'll need to do another episode over there.
Yeah, I think we've wrapped it up. For our audience's sake, I don't think they care as much as I do.
No.
But man, it was cool to have that be the coincidence of, that's been awesome.
It's pretty impressive. So Pras, tell us about Doctor Multimedia. How did this go from there's this fanboy website of interviewing basketball stars and all this information to now you're one of the leading multimedia companies for dentists, veterinarians, doctors, this whole industry?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't care about Arizona basketball or wasn't one of the 9 other viewers of my videos, so what happened was Doctor Multimedia is a full-scale digital marketing agency for the medical field. Almost always small private practices, no hospitals, no group clinics or anything like that. So we really do cater to the individual owner. Assume the listeners or the listeners' futures ahead of them for a podcast like this. But it really actually did start from that venture, which is why some of this context is important, which is we had a doctor friend, he was a veterinarian, that watched what we were doing in online content creation and sports reporting, and he made the connection. I wish I could take credit for it, but he actually made the connection between what we were doing to be successful online and his practice. And this is like 2008, 2009. I think online marketing for such a small business was still pretty new. Groupon was just starting to become a thing. So Facebook business didn't even exist back then. So it was relatively new, but he saw what we were doing and he said, hey, I could use some help with our website. And, all of us very quickly said, no, thank you. Here we are with a labor of love and a passion. We all had careers. Like Point Guard U was not paying anybody's bills. In fact, it was an expense that we all had to bear.
George was your
Yes.
like 5th subscriber who was a paying exclusive member.
That's right. Yeah. And he funded, a meal a month or something for us. So thank you for that. But what he did was he said, hey, I need some online help. And because he was a dear friend, because he was consistent, we gave it a shot. And at first, we literally just ported over what we were doing for news creation to his veterinary practice. And it was overkill in hindsight, but his veterinary practice had a new article on it every morning. And if you went to his practice, you would learn about the people, veterinary care, all the things you could imagine. We had a forum that was short-lived because it's not really what anyone wants to talk about online.
You know what? Maybe in COVID, someone would want to get on there.
That's right.
COVID pet questions in this forum, exclusive forum.
Yeah, it might make a comeback now, but I think 2008 was a little early for us. So what ended up happening was we took over the online marketing. We built the Facebook following. We built promotions. At this time, even having like an online coupon was a relatively novel idea. People would print it out on their printers back then and bring them into the practice. And it really took off. So every veterinary practice is different, but this is one out of Las Vegas. Opening yearly revenue when we started was 2.1 million, went to 2.8 in the first year, 3.5, 4.2, kind of steady growth. Not all us, of course, but we fueled expanding their reach. And really, because they were so early, they benefited from, even to this day, they rank highly, just from past efforts. So here we are, just helping out a friend, a buddy, doing a good job, proud, really still focused on the basketball stuff. And luckily, the guy that owned that practice also happened to own about 20 other practices through Las Vegas, which is big for a veterinary. You don't see that very often. And he gave us a couple more. And he said, hey, I'd like to hire you guys to do what you're doing over at Ann Road Animal Hospital at some other practices. And we said, sure, why not? And, that got us to maybe 5 or 10 clients. Did that for a little while, always as a side hustle. I don't think any of us even called it a business back then. And then we got to the point where the biggest veterinary conference, or one of the biggest veterinary conferences in the world, comes through Las Vegas every year, and that's where we were based out of. So let's show up and see what happens. And for all the dentists out there that go to these conferences, we had never even been in an exhibit hall. You guys kind of know what that looks like, but we didn't. So we just showed up, started talking to people. maybe got 2 or 3 doctors to buy into what we were preaching. And we started there. And then that was our first clients outside of Las Vegas. And then, you guys know, you kind of put your head down and you work really hard and you grow slowly. And then fast forward a few years and, maybe we're at 40 or 50 clients, and then we escalated from there to now we are in the thousands. And that came with a lot of other business growth too. But that's the origin story. So we came from a marketing and online background. We met a doctor. I'm Indian, for those that can't see me. So I've grown up with doctors. My father has a practice. And so I always was on the admin management side of things, combining those 2 experiences. And we slowly started branching out. And one thing led to another. We were just veterinary marketing for a while. And then dental was the second vertical of medicine that we went into, along with optometry. And then these days we'll work with just about any private practice doctor.
So, and let me ask about that, because in dentistry, we tend to think we're our own special flower and that anything different than dentistry doesn't have any lessons for us. Mm-hmm. In fact, to the point where I feel like a year or 2 ago, someone somewhere created a course on how to create Facebook ads for dentists and chiropractors, and there was this burst of Facebook ads from these online marketers that that's what they did. I remember there just being this new wave of previously it didn't exist, but there was a guy who was like chiropractic and dental. Every one of his Facebook ads would be this chiropractic and dental. I'm like, why are you lumping these together? I commented on one of his Facebook ads. I was like, I would probably split those up and target chiropractic and target dental as a marketer, because right now I don't know why, as a dentist, that's rubbing me the wrong way. So I guess, what are the advantages of these different verticals, and what's overlap and what's different between working with a veterinary practice versus working with a dental practice versus other industries?
So first and foremost, you're definitely right. Dental is its own beast. And just so your listeners know, marketers are savvy to that. And so we actually feed off of you guys wanting to be special flowers, right? So in full disclosure, when we first started dental, we didn't say, hey, we're veterinary marketers showing up at a dental conference. We came up with a dental specific name, DDS Multimedia, and we showed up and all of our examples were dentists, and that's how we grew, because that was what people wanted. Now, I think if you dig a little deeper on a lot of those dental specific companies, you'll find that they also moonlight in other industries, and you're just seeing the dental side. And yeah, that guy made a mistake. He shouldn't have lumped those 2 together. He should have just made 2 separate ads. But that said, what is common across the board is the experience of being a practice owner. The challenges, the business ownership, the strain on your time, the delegation, the headaches, the heartaches, those are fairly universal. Now, what those heartaches are or what's causing them, human insurance, cash flow, staff, hiring, those can adjust from one business to another. But there was enough overlap, and there, at least this day and age, is probably better. But 10 years ago, there was a very common misunderstanding of the internet and online marketing, and doctors really didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't really believe in it. They weren't sure that it was worthwhile. I remember my dad telling me when I started this company, his own website, he was like, it's just a website. Who really cares, right? No one really uses it for anything. And that was largely the mentality. So we probably benefited from the fact that all doctors were looking to not have to do this themselves back then. These days, I think you find a lot more do-it-yourselfers or people that just need a minimal amount of support. So that carried over. And just like our basketball expertise was able to be contorted into veterinary medicine, what people were responding to in veterinary medicine was able to be adjusted for optometry or for dental. So to be very clear, we couldn't do the same things for dentists that we were doing for other doctors, but it was the same concepts and then converting it to be dental specific. And I think that's what drives, no doctor wants no dentist wants a general medical post on their dental practice. And so you get a little nervous about cross-contamination or mix-ups. But at the heart of it, it's that, hey, you are still trying to acquire a new patient, which comes with building trust. You guys have the especial anxiety factor of dental anxiety and people being afraid of a dentist. So you have to account for that. But you're really just trying to win over some trust, some confidence, and get someone to choose you and your business. And then generally speaking, once they do that, they'll stick with you for a very long time if you do a good job. So that part has been universal.
No, absolutely. And I wanted to like get this out there because, and I love the fact that you said that marketers actually prey on the fact that we think that we're special, because it's so true. And at the end of the day, the principles of marketing and the principles of doing things right online apply universally across the board. It's just, even within dental, each individual practice, each regional market, you're still going to have to make pivot points and adjustments to figure out what works for you and your practice and your message. So now that we've covered a little bit about Dr. Multimedia, let's go to George. George, why you've now been working with them for
almost a year?
Almost a year?
Yeah.
Tell us about why you're so excited about Dr. Multimedia, and then I think we'll have some stuff to talk about there.
Well, if you've listened to Practice Underwater, you know my tone on online marketing is it's kind of unpredictable in a lot of ways, and it's not something I'd really bank on. And my frustration with the industry, or a lot of the companies in this space, are how much they promise. You know, we promise that we are the company that has the unique special sauce where we're able to do something that nobody else can. And they're the first company I've ever talked to that is very acknowledging what actually is. We're not any more special than anybody else. This is what we do. This is how we do it. And it was very refreshing to hear honesty. I think that was the thing that really spoke to me, is the honest, blunt feelings that I've sort of been burned to feel. You know, I've been burned so many times, wasted so much money to get to this spot of like, okay, nothing works. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right, nothing works. This is what we do. And, you know, that's why I really fell in love with their company. And then we all got surprised when things started working really well in my practice. You know, it wasn't like my marketing actually got much better from working with them, but that wasn't the expectation we had walking into it. It was, let's keep things, let's, you know, do something very low cost, keep it going, and, you know, then I can focus on my practice and not worry about my online marketing. It just gets handled at a low cost versus let me like try to be the best online brand or whatever ever. That just isn't me or my practice or what I'm trying to accomplish.
Well, and you're not this boutique. We've got some crazy story to tell. We've got this, amazing. There's things that are amazing and great and good about your practice, but it's not like that is what makes people choose you guys over other people.
Well, and this is where I was telling you, they are me in an online marketing company. Like I always say, like, Pras, you don't know this, but my joke is my office looks, smells, feels like a dental office.
Okay.
You know, you walk in, you sign the pad, you go sit down, it's just a dental office. And I'm not marketing this most amazing service. We have great reviews. We're convenient. We take your insurance, and, you'll have a good time with us. Mm-hmm. That's why people pick us. It's nothing like this dental amazing Disneyland experience of going to an office. It's just a regular practice. And you guys are like, we're not some amazing, most best thing ever marketing company. We're just really good at what we do, and we know our limits, and we set proper expectations, and we offer a great price point. That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very refreshing to hear somebody with that same philosophical thing that I have with practice ownership with online marketing. I've never heard that before, ever.
Sure. And that's on purpose too, that you haven't heard that before, because like you said, if you're going to cater to dentists being a special flower and everybody wanting to be the best, you almost have to barrage them with, do this or your practice will fail. Or if you're not the number one on Google, you're not a good dentist. Or how will you ever get new patients if you don't have the most reviews? And we essentially pit you against each other, where it's this idea that if you're not dominating, then you're failing. And we know that can't possibly be the case in reality, or you wouldn't have a dental office every other block, in most major cities. You're not cannibalizing each other. Mm-hmm. You can be successful. You just have to be honest about who you are and what your goals are. And how much do you want to grow? Do you want to be a 10 dentist dental practice or not? Do you want to be a 2 dentist practice? So everyone has these specific goals, and the amount to which online marketing will help you accomplish those goals is going to be drastically different for every practice. So yes, those dental marketers are going to make you feel inferior if you're not using their services and their products, because they want to sell you on this vision of a bustling practice or whatever success looks like to you. But, the reality of it is that, well, one, they're not that different amongst each other. There's very little, no one has some special secret sauce that no one else can figure out that's making them uniquely successful. They're probably just doing a really good job and working with really good practices. And that's the secret to being an online marketing company. If your clients are good, you're going to be in good shape. But they can't, in that space where everyone is touting themselves to be the best, it's very hard to come in and be like, hey, we're right up your alley and we'll meet your needs. And that's all, like, there's no song and dance here behind that, right? So that's not going to stand out in the dental marketing world. So it is a little more, we get a better response to it in other verticals where the competition is fierce. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that we also have to be realistic. And because you have gone through so many demos and presentations with every company telling you how they can do everything and be the world, even if we thought that, for us to come in and tell it to you, it would just be like the 10th person telling you that, right? So we also have to figure out, how do we stand out amongst all the noise and actually tap into what people are going through, which is more people are, like Dr. Riri's experience, which is, I've tried like 6 companies. They all promised me the world. I spent the money they were telling me I had to spend, and it didn't really move the needle. So if we come in and we're like, yeah, but that's because you weren't working with us, we'll be the guys that move the needle, he'd be like, I've heard this before. So it's, it's a classic situation of setting expectations low and over delivering, which is, hey, let's calibrate to what in your mind is more appropriate than what you're currently doing. And then let's build from there. And if it goes well, he's having tremendous success with us and we're really thankful for that. But even if it had just gone okay, it would have been a reasonable calibration and it would have actually lined up with what he believed was going to happen. As it turned out, things got better at a lower price point, and now it's like this no-brainer that he wants to tell people about. But even if not, it was a more realistic approach to his practice than burning a lot of overhead on like a vision or a dream that he had.
Okay. And I think that's fantastic. I think that pairing of expectations of, George, you came into this with, honestly, like, moderate expectations. You're like, okay, I'm not going all out. I'm not spending $10,000 a month on marketing here. I'm going to spend a moderate amount so that all of the essentials are taken care of. We've got a budget to then spend on ads and on other things. And we'll see how this goes. And now you have moved up in rankings.
I think you need to go back. So Troy is your president of sales. He was the one that, he happened to call Matt's office. And Matt got on the phone with him. And then I happened to talk to Troy. And to be honest, I was kind of a jerk to Troy for a long time. And I'm going to be, he's not here. He left, but he'll be back. And I told him, I was like, yeah, I don't believe anything you're saying. And I told him, I said, I don't believe you guys are going to do anything better than anybody else. The reason I'm signing up with you guys is because I'm saving I think my management fee with Doctor Multimedia for the same exact services is about 4 times less than it was where I left. So for me, it's just a simple cost savings. I've acknowledged none of this stuff works, so I'm just going to make it cheaper and get the same thing, and that's why I'm switching to you guys. That's pretty much what I told Troy. And, that wasn't the nicest thing to say. And he was like, oh, yeah, you'll see an improvement in results. And I was like, okay, Troy, not believing you. That's not why I'm signing up. Don't even try that on me.
Right.
And, 1 or 2 months later, after my site switched, I became the top rated dentist in Google, and I told Troy, okay, sorry. I came back. I'm like, it's funny because when you search us now, it's the number 1 result is pay-per-click, which we have. The second result is another pay-per-click ad. Then the third is my maps listing, which comes first because we have the most reviews. Thanks as well.
And what are we searching? Are we searching?
Dentist in
Peoria.
Peoria dentist.
Okay.
So first is my practice on pay-per-click. Second is another practice on pay-per-click. Third is my practice on Google Maps. Fourth is another practice on Google Maps. And then fifth is my organic result. So of the first 5 possible links, which, Pras, you know the stats. First 5 links, is that 80+% of...
At least. Yeah. If not more.
So of 90% of all traffic for Peoria dentists, 3 of 5 are headed to my site.
It's just a slam dunk. At that point. Yeah.
And so... we've seen a increase in my organic new patient flow to the point where now no magazines, just online only marketing, and I'm about to throw the magazines in there once COVID sort of settles down a little bit more, I'm seeing a higher new patient flow of higher quality than I'd ever seen before. So it's worked really well, but I did not come in with that expectation. And I love how they're like, yeah, I mean, honestly, it happened great, but that's not the expectation we want to set for everybody.
So let's talk about that. Let's go back to this phrase. We've thrown this phrase out of none of it works. What is like it? And online marketing, first off, we're excluding all the other in-person, print, mailers. You guys have said we are not a full service, like everything across the board that you could use for marketing company. You're online marketing, which includes specific things. So what are the things that the expectations that people have coming into this of like, this is what this is going to do for me, and where do they get burned and frustrated and end up like George was a year ago? What are those expectations that people have that you have to kind of work with when they come in?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of this is how we're being trained right now by social media and Google ads and just websites in general. But people almost have it in reverse. They think that if I'm number one on Google, all my problems will be solved and my business will be successful. It happens the other way around. You traditionally get to number one on Google by being a good business or the best business or in the conversation for best businesses. So a lot of people look at a struggling practice or numbers that aren't where they want, and then they say, I need an outside solution to this problem. The internet, right? That is where it all comes from. So I want to dominate. That's the most overused word in online marketing. I want to dominate the internet. I want to be the top of Google. I want to have the most Facebook followers. And I think even well-meaning doctors, a lot of them use that as the measures of success. When you talk to us, we'll be like, yeah, but what was your revenue? Okay, so cool. You have 10,000 followers. How many of them are in the 3 miles around your practice? So it's that, to me, the biggest thing that we fight is that everyone has it flipped, and they think that they can essentially trick Google or manipulate the game, and that if they do that better than everybody else, that they'll somehow win. Now, even if you are going to win that way, it's always short-lived victories, because you can drive all the new patients you want to a practice, and if you guys don't retain them, then you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So it's like the online marketing is meant to be a reflection of real life. It obviously gets glamored up a little bit. The pictures are better than maybe what you look like on a normal day, or the office was especially clean during the welcome video. So there is that element of it. But generally speaking, you want it to be authentic. And that's the new word that goes around in a lot of social media marketing these days. So it's more about running a really great practice and sharing that. And I think in Dr. Ira's case, like, he's very upfront about what his practice is. He's not, if you want some dental Disneyland, he's not going to go out of his way to convince you that that's what you'll have at his practice.
Right.
He might try to say that, hey, that's not as important as you think. Just come on in, give us a shot. You might find that you're really happy. But he's not going to jeopardize his kind of core mission for a few fringe patients, because he knows he'll probably lose them over time to someone that is promoting the new dental Disneyland, and then they'll check that out, and who knows if they'll ever come back. So that false, we've used the word expectation a lot, so I don't want to say false expectation, but that false belief that the internet is some kind of outside solution to your internal business problems. The people that win online run great businesses and have good online marketing, and together that's a powerful combo. We often say internally, we can help a good practice become great. It's really difficult for us to help a bad practice become good, no matter what we do as marketers. So, and then I think the other thing that's difficult for medical practices, and I do this in one of my talks that I do at some conferences, is that if you're kind of hardcore educational about it, marketing and sales are not the same thing. They're totally separate. And I'd use a double equal sign with a slash through it, because I'm trying to say marketing is not sales and sales is not marketing. From an academic standpoint, marketing's job is to bring people to your sales funnel. And then it's sales' job to convert them into customers or patients. So a lot of doctors, though, nobody has a sales team in their medical practice. So they think if my number of new patients are going up and my revenue is going up, my marketing must be good. And the other way around, if my marketing is really good, then my revenue and my new patient numbers are going to go up. That's not actually the case. A marketer's job is to bring your practice more opportunities to get patients. So even if your practice is awesome, if your numbers are stagnant, your marketing actually isn't doing anything. It's not increasing the opportunities. It's just delivering the same results every month, which might be fine. But a lot of doctors, and this happens on both sides, they have terrible online marketing, but their practice is successful, so they figure their online marketing can't be that bad. Or their online marketing is great and their practice isn't doing well, and they're mad about why. Where, it's really that twofold. So one of the reasons we present ourselves the way that we do is we want you to really believe in your core that this is a piece of the puzzle and it's not the solution to all of your problems. It's a solution to some of your problems. But if you don't take care of the important stuff, the stuff that you guys preach, we have no shot at providing you results. And we can't take a bad practice and just market their way into being a good practice. We can fake it for a little while, I guess, online, but eventually the truth does come out, and people will get burned by their experiences in coming in. So that's the number one challenge, I'd say, that we face from a mindset point of view. And then I'd say on the flip side, there's also just really unrealistic expectations of how much your money will get you in the world of online marketing. A doctor or a dentist might be spending a couple $1,000s a month, and to them that's a big deal. And then you call up Google AdWords wondering, why it's not successful. And they're like, oh yeah, until you're willing to spend 20 times that, don't worry about us. Like, it's just in the overall world of online marketing, there's so much noise, there's so much competition that even a lot of money doesn't always mean results. And we actually think the opposite. We think you can get plenty for very little money as long as you're focused on the right things and not kind of distracting yourself with all these other things that people are selling you.
Okay, cool.
And I kind of want to take a step here because, I think Richard was asking almost more or less your business model. As an online marketing company, how do you feel so cool in your own feet to say we don't do anything like the best ever? We're just, in terms of that philosophy, how do you guys sort of, I've talked about your philosophy around that, but you guys actually haven't actually articulated it.
Yeah. So the short answer is because we know it works. Because we know that what we do coupled with a good practice will put them over the top to see successful results. Now, granted, a lot of our clients are hoping to be good practices, and maybe they don't get those astronomical results because they're not there yet. But we're confident that if you really boil this whole online marketing world down, you need a good website that doesn't scare people off, that invites them to come in, and most importantly, converts. You need consistent social media. Even if it's not the best in the world, if you're consistent with it, you're going to see results. You need as many reviews as humanly possible, and you never want to stop. You want to just keep accruing good reviews. And I call those the 3 pillars of an online presence because generally speaking, if you do a good job in those 3 areas, it doesn't really matter what else you do. You will have a pretty good online presence. And meanwhile, if any one of those areas is really bad, it also doesn't really matter what else you do. You will not be at your full potential. So don't get me wrong. As a full-scale agency, we can do AdWords and we can do email marketing and we can do photo and video, and the list goes on and on. But if those 3 pillars aren't strong, then you're going to have some weak spots. And so when we come in, our goal is just to make those 3 pillars better for whichever pillars you allow us to work on. So if you only give us the website, great. We're going to make sure your website is better or the best it can be. And that's our contribution to your practice. If you're going to give us the social media and the reviews, we'll make those the best that they can be. And we know that if you do that, most of the work is done. And then, yes, a lot of the conversation is spent on the fringes, somebody wanting to go from number 3 to number 2 or number 2 to number 1. But the real differences happen when you go from page 3 to page 1, or you go from 20 reviews to 200 reviews. The cumulative effect of that online. And I don't know if this is unique to me and my company, but what I tell doctors all the time is I say, you guys often get caught up in clicks and conversions and, CPC. And it's like, what's supposed to happen is, hopefully behind every one of those clicks is a real person in your community that has a job, probably a family, they might have kids, they have hobbies, and almost all of your patients are coming from a very small radius in the world. So online marketing is meant to be how we get things out to the masses. You really only care about what people think about you in your immediate community. And so if you just put your eggs in an online marketing basket and you have no community involvement and no visibility in your local city, and your reputation is mediocre or doesn't even exist, you won't fake that out. Whereas if you realize that everything I do online can be augmented by what I do in real life. And if you're a new practice and you're out at the farmer's market, or if you're partnering with your neighbors down the street and you're offering friends and family discounts to the employees of everybody in your strip mall, that's going to feed your online marketing. Your online marketing isn't going to create that. So I guess to answer your question, it's maybe a bit of a reality check even for our own selves to make sure our heads don't get too big, so that when we have a client that's just doing tremendous, that we remember that, hey, we're one part of the puzzle and we're going to be the best part we can be. But I could tell you all these success stories about dentists that are just blowing it out of the water, but I'm conflating their success with me being their online marketer. I'm contributing, but I'm not the biggest factor. Even for my clients that will swear by me as being the reason for their growth, I know internally that just like they were investing in my company and their online marketing, they were also investing in their practice, they were investing in their direct marketing, they were investing in their communities. All of that together works. Another joke, I've shared with you guys a couple marketing jokes that I use, but the truth is no marketer knows exactly what works. Because if any of us did, we would just all do that and we could save a bunch of time. Marketing is a combination of a lot of little efforts. And by the time you get to a successful point, you actually don't know which individual component it was that led to that success. All you can do is try to calibrate and tweak based on the expense. So you're like, well, my Google ads are going okay, but I think $3,000 a month is a little bit of a reach. Let me adjust it back to $2,000 a month and see if there's any difference. And so you're constantly tweaking these little components, but your overall success comes from doing everything, not just any one thing. I don't know if that's a direct answer, but
yeah. And I think the other point that you made was, if I knew how to make somebody rank number one on Google, I certainly wouldn't be in dentistry.
Right.
I'd use that skill set somewhere else.
Right.
And I think it's that idea that, elitist online marketing groups selling their marketing with that in mind, it's just not accurate. Nobody really has those answers. And I think owning that is so powerful, because then it just, I don't know, I felt like I trusted you guys a lot more when I heard that from you, as opposed to hearing another reason why you guys are going to get me to the top or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully it's refreshing, at least for now. Once it becomes successful, then everyone will switch their sales pitch to that, and we'll be inundated with that. How like every practice is
all
now,
the humble marketers, the copycat humble marketers.
Well, now every dental practice is about joining a dental family, right?
Yeah.
Because that took off, and now everybody wants to do it. But the ones that are authentically a dental family are the ones that are going to have success with it. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like the skill set, but what people would take advantage on, I think if I used the word prey, or maybe you said the word prey, was that doctors have so little background on this. I know this is one of your core missions, is that like you come out of medical school with so little business training, even less marketing training, and next to no online marketing training. So we can come in, and even though you're the more educated of us in the room, you feel like you don't know anything. And if I'm kind of puffing my chest out as knowing everything about online marketing, you kind of defer to the expert. And so doctors are sort of built that way. We defer to doctors as just regular patients. You're the expert. If you say something, I'm going to do it. So psychologically, a lot of you guys go, well, that guy seems like he knows what he's talking about, so I'll just do what he says. And there's no fact checking. Like in all these like demonstrations you've gone through, or website presentations, like they never give you something that you can analytically evaluate and decide if it's true or not, right? They're just like hopes for the future. We'll get you to number one. Well, you'll have this much traffic. We'll do this many patients. There's nothing behind that. And so without anything behind that, how do you even have a conversation of what could be, where it's like, well, let me tell you why your website isn't very good. And so here are the things that I'm looking at on your specific website that I think should be fixed. And not that what I'm telling you is revolutionary. It's just that no one else has ever taken the time or energy to actually look at like your website and tell you what could be fixed, because you could just take my advice and go to your web guy and fix all the problems. That's not the issue that I'm pointing out. I'm pointing out that, hey, whoever's in charge of your website is missing the expertise to catch any of these things. And so hopefully you'll give us a shot.
Yeah. And then I think, Richard, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, well, I also wanted to say, I think we've also identified we have a bias on our podcast that acquisitions is the easier route for young dentists who want to be in practice ownership. It is just so much dang work to do a startup. Not that it's the wrong thing to do, George, but it's a ton of work and a really long runway, and it's easier to screw up royally the startup process. You tend to be a good fit for an acquisition, is what we've identified. And so I have my thoughts on why that's the case, but I want to hear your perspective on an existing practice and what you can do for them versus if someone's having to like build from scratch. I know you can do that, but that's not necessarily your focus. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We're big enough that we have both, of course, but I think what we do is particularly well suited for an acquisition. When you ask that question, I'm thinking of the mentality of the person on the other end. So when you acquire a practice, you inherit 1,000 fires that you have to put out, and you quickly realize that you can't single-handedly solve all these problems. So you turn to experts, you turn to vendors, and you're building off of what's already there, and you're just trying to make improvements, big or small, to further the practice along. So that mentality goes really well with, okay, I can see that our online presence is not the best it could be. I'm looking for a solution that will make it better. And in time, if I find a solution that I think can make it better than that, I'll switch to that. So it's more of a business owner mentality. I think the startup mentality, you have to do everything yourself. So when you look at cost, when you look at time, when you're in startup mode, you'll paint the walls yourself, you'll build the website yourself, you'll do the social media yourself. And then once you get busy enough that you need to stop doing those things, you look to hire an outside company. So it's kind of like counter to the idea of a do-it-yourself startup to now ship money out for something that, at least in theory, you could do yourself. You could go on Squarespace, you could go on Wix. And so it's that kind of patchwork. So we get a lot less true startups than we do people 6 months or a year into their startup, realizing that, okay, the times have changed for them, and what used to be worth their time is no longer worth their time. And I think we build from there. So I think it's that when you take on an acquisition and you just have a stack of 20 things on your desk, you realize your job is to get through them as fast as possible, as opposed to like the startup mentality of, let me look at the first piece of paper and let me really think about this and spend some time considering it, and then I'll do it myself.
Does this reflect who I am?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the DIY startup, that's the group that I'm the most scared of. We've had people who've done it successfully on the show. We've also had some practice underwater guests that were truly struggling. And I think marketing is an area where, ironically, some of online marketing does really well when it's organic and from the dentist. I think the social media side of things does really well. I think you've also talked about how a website doesn't need to be overly complicated to do well. And so maybe the DIY crowd does a little bit of that themselves. The social media stuff, they do really well because their heart is in it and they're showing up authentically in it. But at the end of the day, sometimes you're in a situation where you're like, I need to do this, and if I don't do something, it's just not going to happen. And that's a lot of times where a lot of dentists find themselves is I'm not willing to pour my heart and soul into this. And so I need someone to do this for me. And I think it's also really refreshing. We were talking earlier, you were saying, if someone is already doing this really well themselves, we're not going to improve on the social media stuff. If you have really authentic team photos, posts, and are crushing it in social media, us taking over your social media content is not going to change that drastically for the better. And in some cases, it might actually be worse.
Definitely.
So that's where I'm kind of seeing the difference here is that for a startup, either your heart and soul's in it and you're doing it really well, or some people need a whole ton of hand-holding and content creation. And you guys are that company at the same time where you're going to come in and do all of the little pieces and videography at their practice. And you can come up with a strategy and an overarching plan. But that's just not your bread and butter every day. Is let's take people through the startup process from the very beginning to the very end with hand holding and custom everything and I don't know. I feel like I'm belaboring the point.
No, well, and I think I want to add something, and I want you to talk about this because you guys have a very different business model than a lot of other online marketing companies in dentistry. Mm-hmm. I think the typical business model is charge somebody a lot for a website, and then charge them a lot on an ongoing basis. And it's always like, charge them a lot. Mm-hmm. And you're like, yeah, I mean, and
that does well.
Yeah, but you always, it's funny because you were like, I almost have to explain the opposite. You used this line earlier today. It's like, I'm still making my money. It's just like over a few years. And so I'd like you to explain that model to our audience so they can understand, where you guys come in philosophically and how you're willing to take a short-term loss. And I think that's also valuable so they can understand where you guys come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this concept is surprisingly simple in the business world, but as I told you guys, marketers look at dentists and they see dollar signs. I mean, I can just tell you, I know for a fact that for companies that are in multiple medical spaces, before they go to a dental conference, they increase the prices, on the paperwork because dentists will pay more. And then when we go to an orthodontic conference, we increase the dental prices to go even higher, right? Because they're trying to calibrate for the market. And that's their approach. They're always trying to squeeze everything they can out of the doctor that they're talking to. But the idea that we're going to deliver you an immediate solution, or that if you just spend a lot of money that we're going to solve your problem fast, what I tell my clients, especially the ones that are skeptical, is marketing takes time. And I need you to be able to afford the time that it's going to take to see results. So let's say you have $1,000. I would rather you give me 10 months at $100 a month and give myself 10 months to show you results than just charge you $1,000 up front and see what happens from there. And now you're freaking out because I haven't, changed your practice in 30 days despite the budget. So to answer your question about the model, it is very common, especially when you get to the boutique agencies in medical, large upfront fees. And I'm not even saying that the quality isn't worth it or that the labor involved doesn't justify the cost, but I just don't think it makes that much of a difference marginally over a $2,000 website or a $1,000 website, as long as you have certain basic components. I think the harder challenge is, how do you make the website better every month, and how do you get more utility and functionality of it so that it actually becomes a part of the practice? And I think that's worth paying for on a monthly basis. So if the decision process is, I have to get you to trust me enough to fork over $5,000 up front, that's a lot of work that I have to put in before we ever start doing business. If I can come to you and say, you know what? I know you don't trust me. You've been burned by everybody else. How about you give me $400 a month? And even without a contract, how about we talk about doing this for a year? And then after a year, I don't have to sell you on anything. I've either done a good job and I've provided value for $400 a month, or I haven't. And no contract or commitment or upfront fee is going to hide the results after the fact. So I think when we break it down like that, it takes some of the fear factor. We joke about patients' fear of the dentist. Well, dentists have a fear of online marketing, right? And online marketers. So I'm able to take out some of the risk. And even when we do charge for other websites, we always make it refundable so that if you don't launch our website and take it with you, we give you full ownership of the website. So you're not going to have to go over this again in 12 months if it doesn't work out with us. You at least walk away with a website that you love. And then we put the onus on, okay, we launched the website. Great. Nothing has actually been accomplished yet. It's day one. Now that we can use the website, let's see what we can do together to grow your practice. So if I'm just squeezing you for every penny you've got at the beginning, when I come to you 45 days later and say, hey, this is a good opportunity for Facebook ads, you should put $1,000 into it, you're like, well, I don't have any more money, and we're both stuck. Whereas if I've done it right and I come to you and you trust me and I say, hey, put $1,000 into Facebook ads. I don't know that it's going to work, but it looks like a good opportunity. The numbers seem to line up. Let's do it for 2 months and then we'll reevaluate. You're like, okay. So in a way, I'm kind of giving myself more rope by not trying to take it all up front. And I'm also trying to earn my keep, because I don't want you as a client for a year. I don't want you as a client for 3 years. I want you as a client for 5 to 10 years, or as long as you own your practice. And if that means less now to build that relationship, I think you were joking about our office. You're like, once you heard about it, you're like, well, that's surprisingly reasonable. I think people will feel the same way about our pricing structure. They're like, oh, yeah, we weren't doing the math. Like, if you're a company that's worried about your customer service, you need to very carefully calculate the lifetime value of a client, because you know you're going to lose them at some point. So you build in your upfront cost, you build in your contract term, and when someone sells that client, you're like, great, we're profiting $17K off of this, no matter what happens from here. For us, that's a huge waste of time, and we would spend all of our energy just constantly chasing new clients, where we can say, hey, all right, he's only paying $100 a month, but that's going to be $1,200 a year. And if he's with us for 12 years, okay, cool. We've got $14,000 off of this client, plus whatever else happens between now and then. So I think it's just playing the long game, would be the summary of how we price it out, that we honestly don't care what happens in the first 1 to 2 years in terms of our profitability. That's not what we can build, like a sustainable marketing agency at scale. And so I don't want to name any competitors on here, but you have companies that charge $30,000 or $20,000 up front. Once that website is built, they have to turn all of their attention to acquiring the next 30 or 20 grand website. It's how they get their revenue. So they can't possibly be super invested in your $1,000 a month payments when they're chasing 30 grand, up front by selling the next guy. So this isn't by accident. We identified this early on. As I mentioned, we were pretty early in online marketing. And so when we showed up as 3 guys in an exhibit hall, we also looked at what all the big corporates were doing. And none of what I'm saying would be endorsed by a corporate entity, right? The math is all backwards. But we saw that our entry point here was, hey, just if you like what we're saying, just give us a shot. And we'll either cut it or we won't. And we'll be successful as a company because we're either going to be successful more often than not, or we won't. And we're happy to kind of take that gamble.
Well, and I love how, from an existing dentist standpoint, pretty much no matter what they're paying, you guys are either the same or less.
Yeah, we will generally price match or beat any price as a starting point, for a level of service.
So that's like, it's hard to lose and that was my experience of, I'm paying 4 times less now. So no matter what the service is, I'm pretty much happy, and that's a great starting place for a relationship. And then it just went really well from there. Cool. But I think you guys put yourselves in a great, and I want you to talk about it, where you kind of cater to every part of the market, where you have, the person that just wants a website, wants it to be as cheap as possible, doesn't want to pay a lot up front for their site, just wants it up there and managed. You guys have something for them. That person that wants to be really aggressive with their online marketing, wants to go all out, and you guys have a more boutique option for them too. And how you built a company to have 2 completely different clients that you're able to simultaneously serve, I think is also kind of your long-term vision of you working their way up the ladder, where you might start at an entry-level product and then you sort of work your way up as your needs change.
Exactly. And if they change to be appropriate. So, that was a very astute observation when we kind of told you more about our company and the inner workings. You picked up on that right away, which is that I've been picking on the boutique, so let me flip to the other side, which is a lot of doctors and dentists pay like $69 for a crappy website, and their mentality is exactly what you said. They're like, well, it's only $69. Why should it be good? I'm perfectly content with it not being very great because I don't pay anything for it. So even for them, we're like, okay, you might be paying $69, but for $99 a month, you can have a tremendously better product. That's a good business decision. So kind of, if you're on either end of the spectrum, we can calibrate, because there's been entire companies built just catering to one slice of the spectrum. You have your volume companies that are very low priced but don't offer a good product or service. You have your very expensive companies that have a great product and great service, but what difference is it making on your bottom line? That's kind of what practice owners have to figure out. So I wish I could take all the credit for this, but it was actually when we brought people from outside organizations into our small startup. So when we were a small startup, we were all boutique, right? We had one level of service. We did everything that we could possibly do for you. We were doing it on a discount, and that's how we earned our business. But when we brought in a couple of people with outside experience, they were like, well, that's great what you're doing, and we support that, but you are just removing yourself from actually the majority of the market. Like even your low price point was $400 a month back then, but this was like 10 years ago. Even your price point is immediately shutting people off to you because they can't wrap their heads around giving the website guy $400 a month. And we were like, okay, you know what? Okay, you're right. So we basically created a list of services that, in my mind, it equates to what is your marketing budget where you're going to be comfortable. And here's what I can do for you for that amount of money. So my sales team spends zero amount of their day trying to convince you that a certain price point is worth it. And they spend their entire day trying to find the level of services that matches your budget that you're okay with. And then we'll use that as the beginning of our relationship. And if your needs change, or if you were just holding out on us, so many dentists just aren't honest at the beginning because they want to vet us. And then we get the truth 6 months later. Oh, I'm paying this guy $500 and this other guy $1,000, but I wanted to make sure you were legitimate. So once you reveal that to us, then we can show you how we can optimize other parts of your marketing. But just like anything, I mean, you guys just want a new patient to come in so they can meet your staff. And if they like them, they're coming back. And if they don't, they're probably not. And sometimes it's just that simple. Online marketing is no different. If you ask me or Troy for something and we take a week and a half to get back to you, and then you have to follow up a week later about it not getting done, this isn't going to last very long. Meanwhile, if you're like, man, I know those guys have a lot of clients, but every time I ask for something, they're all right on top of it. We can build off of that, and then, not every practice has a different marketing budget. So why are you trying to shove your practice into some business model of what you should be spending? Why isn't the business model trying to, contort itself to your practice?
Yeah. And I think you said it really well right there, but that's essentially the most refreshing thing I've ever heard when it comes to online marketing. I've never heard that anywhere else. I mean, and that's what drew me to them from the beginning, was just how honest they are. Like, look, we're not trying to be everything to everyone. Whatever your needs are, we can do them. You let us know.
Perfect. Well, we're running out of time. We're almost at an hour here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think there's definitely maybe some potential future episodes if we got deeper into specific strategies, into, the website, or into ad spends or SEO. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. But this has been a lot of fun. This has been a great conversation. I'm excited for what's to come, and George and Matt both have been working with you guys, and then Shared Practices, we are building our website with you guys and building out the things that we're building. So a lot to be excited for, and I really appreciated you coming on the show. So thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys for, first of all, flying out here and visiting us and seeing what we do. It was really fun to have you. And then, if I may, I've learned so much about Shared Practices and your mission statement. And I think what a lot of people really struggle with is practice ownership right for them or not? And that's a question that you guys specialize in. But once you decide it is, I think there is kind of a sub list of decisions that you've also made at the same time, which is valuing your time, really being critical of where your money is going, hiring, all the internal stuff. And so part of the mentality of taking all that on as a practice owner is also letting some things go, like not being so wrapped up in what shade of purple your website is, or, what the bio photo that you have. It's like, as a true practice owner, you have so many bigger things to worry about, but you have to trust the people that you're delegating these. You can't just delegate, and then not trust the company or the person that's given to you. That's how you get burned. So it's kind of that combination. Like, if this wouldn't work, I'm motioning to Doctor and myself, our relationship wouldn't work if either he just gave us all the work and then we did a bad job, or if we did stuff and he did a bad job on his end. It's kind of that uniting of a realistic practice owner with a company that's being upfront. That's how we earned his business. And then now he's all geeked out about, all the different things he can do with online marketing. But he kind of became hardened through his experience as a practice owner. I think a lot of people go through that progression of practice ownership, like changes you, I think is fair to say. And one of the things you have to realize is like what is important to invest your time in, what's important to invest your money in, and the difference between the two. And so we kind of ended up being this sweet spot for doctors that don't want to do it themselves, and they realize that we're not the end-all be-all, but we're a really great step. And then how far they want to take it from there is totally up, to them and their practices.
Fantastic. I loved it. Okay.
That was awesome.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Loved being here.
Take care.